Welcome to the Care Right podcast, your go-to resource for all things elder care. Guiding us through this journey is Annalee Kruger, the founder of Care Right Incorporated, and she has been steadfastly supporting families across the United States. Each episode brings you expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical advice, ensuring that you're well equipped to provide the best possible care for your loved ones. Expect to gain valuable knowledge, learn from real-life stories, and get inspired to take action in your own caregiving journey. So buckle up as we dive into an in-depth discussion of elder care planning and together embrace the journey of caring for aging loved ones on the Care Right podcast.
And welcome everybody to The Whole Truth in the Bay Area, California. I am Steve Seid.
And from Hotlanta, Georgia, I'm Kurt Dupuis.
Episode number 50.
I know. Are we starting with Costanza at the beginning? That's good news. That's awesome.
We did 50 of these. That's a big time milestone, I feel like.
Isn't that wild?
It's amazing.
It does not feel like 50 for sure. I still remember the conversation that we had when we talked about this for the first time. And here we are, 2.5 years later, 50 episodes. And
yeah,
we've shared before, like the numbers of how many podcasts just fall off the face of the earth. Several like financial podcasts that I like, they seem to make it 6 or 12 months and then they're out. And here we are, 2.5 years, 50 episodes. Let's go.
What is it? The average one falls off to, there's like a graveyard at like below 12 or something.
Yeah. And it's less than 20. If you make it over 20, you are in podcast land, you are elite. So at 50, we are marginally better than that.
We are marginally elite. Is that what you're saying? We are
yeah,
slightly
I'm okay with that.
Elite.
That's a good tombstone. Good tombstone reading right there.
Yeah. Thanks everyone who's listened to an episode and who's listening to this episode. This whole thing's been kind of a trip, hasn't it? It's been a lot of fun. So yeah, I don't know what else to say to that other than let's get to 100, right?
So many people it's meeting for the first time. They already know about the podcast. And like, well, my job here is done then. If you know about the podcast, you know what we're about. So
yeah, can only go downhill from here if I open my mouth, that kind of thing. Yeah,
fair. That's fair.
Well, this episode 50 is one we're actually very excited about. We've got Annalee Kruger on the show today. Annalee is the owner of Care Right Incorporated. She has a 25-year career in the senior care industry, doing senior care planning. In addition to Care Right, where she kind of advises people on end-of-life planning, she also started Plan for Life, which is an elder planning specialist designation, which we'll talk about a little bit more throughout the episode because we think it'd be a good thing for our audience to think about. And there really is kind of two reasons why we wanted to have her on. One is we think there's a real opportunity to differentiate here. Most financial professionals, they do certain things around elder care and planning, but there's an opportunity to go that extra mile. And that extra mile, in our view, could really help you differentiate the practice. What comes with it, the next generation. This is a way to sort of solidify that relationship unquestionably, and referrals as well. Where does business development come from? Where does growth come from? It comes from doing a really great job for clients, and this is one way to do it.
My mom's one of four, and she has 3 brothers. But when it came to the end-of-life care for my grandparents, it mostly fell on her shoulders. And there was no plan. There was not a lot of communication between the siblings. And I saw the net result of that, which is not great. Yeah. And so I've seen it firsthand. But then secondly, my wife and I did an estate plan earlier this year. We have a financial plan. Aging it can wreck your relationships and it can wreck your finances. So it just makes sense that would be part of both the familial and the financial conversation. So, and Annalise, as a former social worker, to me, she just exudes caring about people, which is like the starting place for her as a person. So I think it was super interesting to learn about it. I think all your previous points are valid. And I think what a great messenger that Annalise was to deliver this message.
I offered to have her meet my parents. If she didn't say no to that, she's a very caring person. You know what's funny is I throw that joke out there. My parents will absolutely listen to this episode. So I'm just joking. Mom and Dad, I promise I'm joking, kind of. A little bit.
Maybe. So when we come back, we'll get into our interview with Annalee Kruger. But before we do, make sure you hit subscribe, auto download. That's a feature on Google Podcasts that I have just enabled. Tell a friend. And as always, write us a review if you have a couple minutes. It helps other people find the show. So without further ado, here's our interview with Annalee Kruger. And we are so excited to welcome Annalee Kruger. Thanks for your time today, Annalee.
Well, thanks for asking me to join your podcast today.
So before we get into it, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your story, your background, and the organization that you've started?
Perfect. All right. So my name is Annalee Kruger. I was a social worker in long-term care communities, actually called continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs. 30 years ago when I first started my career. And back then, one person did all of the marketing, all of the tours, and that person was me, as well as my social work job, as well with doing assessments and care plans and meeting with the families and leading support groups. Every day was a variation of the same thing. Adult kids found themselves thrust into crisis mode with their aging parents. And mom was in the hospital. She's the primary caregiver to dad, who has dementia. Mom fell. She broke her hip. She's in the hospital. What do we do? Because the hospital is saying, you need to find somewhere to go tomorrow because we're going to discharge your mom. So the kids would come and do the tours, and they were always frazzled. They were overwhelmed. They were blindsided by the medical crisis. And they were blindsided because they had no idea what questions to ask or what to look for during that tour. I was spending 2 and 3 hours at a time with each family because they had so many questions. They think Medicare is going to pay for everything. A lot of the adult kids made the promise to mom and dad that we'll never put you in a facility.
Yep.
Kids were angry at each other because brother Tom said something stupid 30 years ago at a birthday party, and now no one talks, and now dad had a stroke.
We've all got a Tom, don't we?
We all have a Tom in our family. So anyway, after 18 years of working as an employee in long-term care and doing these tours and meeting with families, I was like, oh God, I think I have a business model here. So I left corporate America, started Care Right in 2011. And by 2012, I was already nationwide with working with families across the country in developing customized aging plans. We know that families just don't want to talk about the what ifs and the what whens of aging. They don't want to talk about the good, the bad, and ugly. And so that's why they don't put a plan together, because they don't want to usually talk about stuff like that. So that's what I do. I work with families across the country. I've been virtual before you had to be. I was virtual in 2012 because families just don't live near each other.
Yeah.
So the only way I could facilitate their family meeting was to leverage, at that time, Skype.
You describe a caregiver kind of a multilateral way. Like, what to you, what is a caregiver?
Oh, that's actually probably the best question you're going to ask, because there's a lot of families. You're welcome. There are a lot of families that see, this is going to be fun. There are families out there that are caregivers, but they don't even know that they're caregivers. So that's why that's such a good question, because you're a caregiver if you're doing anything for an aging loved one or vulnerable adult, and you're not getting paid or compensated for it. So we're talking, even if you go over and drop off groceries or drop off milk, or have to run errands or go shopping or go to the pharmacy and set up their medications for them. If you're coordinating doctor's appointments, if you're paying their bills, because you're the financial power of attorney, if you're obviously helping with physical care, those are all caregivers. And families don't realize that until they're really, really overwhelmed by what I call the caregiver snowball. Because it starts out manageable, but then when you start taking time off work or having to burn through your PTO or your FMLA benefits, because you're like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? Like, all I'm doing, I'm totally consumed by mom and dad's needs.
Yeah. So we're going to get to maybe a couple of case studies for Seid's side of the family later. This is so pertinent to me because I just watched my mom deal with this. She's one of four and the only girl, which I think is important because I think that onus tends to be. I've got two girls, so I think I'm diversified. But that a lot of that onus seems to be on the women. But so I watched her go through this, and then when they both passed, watching. Like she was power of attorney for everything, but even still, like there was conflict. There was to which there is still no resolution. It was just so many problems to your snowball point that they had no idea were even coming, and they're still not resolved to this day. So the need for this is gigantic. I think that's pretty clear. And I listened to one of your podcast episodes, but you had a whole episode where you talked about basically, look, what I saw it as is, look, do this for free by yourself if you want to. These are all of the things to consider. And I think it was an hour long, and it was very detailed. Yeah. And there was a ton of stuff I had never even thought of. But if you were to sort of simplify that into pillars, what would you say are some of the main pillars that people need to think about planning and aging?
What's working well at home right now with mom and dad? Are they eating? Are they taking their medications? Are they safe to drive? Are they falling? Is their house senior safe? So that's one pillar. Like what is happening right now? What is everyone in the family's perspective of what's happening right now? You can imagine when I facilitate these family meetings, everyone has their own perspective of how their parent is doing, and everyone has their own relationship with their parent and their siblings. And so perspectives are very different most of the time. So pillars are what is working well right now? What is not working well right now? What red flags or what concerns are you seeing? Another pillar is what conversations have you already had as a family about the what whens of aging? It's not rocket science to know that as we get older, we will need care. Like we are not going to get healthier as we age. So no one should be surprised by this whole aging thing when mom and dad need more care. So that's a pillar, is how do you communicate as a family, and what kind of conversations have you had already? Another pillar is we know that mom and dad want to age in place at home, but assisted livings and nursing homes are full of also people who wanted to age in place at home, right? So what's the plan? What's our plan as a family when mom and dad cannot stay at home anymore because either they can't afford the home care costs and Medicare does not pay for that, right? So what's the plan when mom and dad can't afford to stay at home, but what's the plan when they either can't afford to stay at home or they can't find quality care workers that are consistent, dependable, reliable, compassionate, and properly trained? That's a tall order. You wouldn't think that it is, but it's a tall order. So that's another pillar. Another pillar is end of life discussions. Like, do you know what your parents already have in place? Do they have a power of attorney? And is it you? Because you need to know if you are, because that can become a full-time job. What do they have in place already for plans and paperwork? Do they have long-term care insurance? Do they have a life insurance hybrid? Does your dad have VA benefits? So what kind of paperwork is in order, and where are the gaps in the planning with that type of paperwork?
Talk to us about what an aging plan actually is and what the components are.
Yep. Which is easy because that piggybacks on what I just shared on those pillars.
Right.
So when we talk about an aging plan, it's me facilitating their family meeting, finding out literally what's working well right now, what's not working well. I also get the same information from mom and dad, right? Because the whole family is my client, and mom and dad need to have a say because it's their aging plan. And we talk about, what do you already have in place? Do you have home care? Do you have fall buttons? Do you have cameras in the house? Do you have a housekeeper? Do you have a driver? So what services do you already have in place? If you're the primary caregiver, what can we take off your caregiver plate and find a solution for that? Yes, you're going to have to pay for, but that's better than you getting burned out as a caregiver. So we talk about the infamous grab and go binder. So getting all
Holy
of their
smokes.
documents. Yeah, and that's mine. So there's 11 tabs in here, like accounts, passwords, your business succession plan,
So-
your funeral arrangements.
Annalee just held up a very
Oh.
thick volume with all kinds of paper and tabs in there. So, in other words, a
Yeah.
lot of information.
That was like a 4-incher. That thing was thick.
And that's mine. That's just me, and I'm single, right?
Wow.
Like, I don't have kids. I don't have a trust in place. So when it's a family putting their stuff in order, it's the value of that is making sure that you don't have any gaps in your plans and making sure that your documents are updated. And why that's important is because some of these folks did get their powers of attorney done 10, 15, 20 years ago, but maybe the agents that they listed are dead or demented, or they no longer have a relationship with that person. And so it's good to, that's part of that aging plan is look at your documents. Is everything up to date? Does it still make sense for your current wishes versus 20-year ago wishes? And then we talk about, we know, mom and dad, that you want to age in place at home. Here's the positives of aging in place at home. You're home with your own belongings, your own routine. But the downsides can be that it's still lonely. You're not eating very well. The television tends to be their socialization. And so they may or may not be agreeable to bringing home care in. And then we also know that if they can't stay at home, they need to be thinking about, where does it make sense for me to hang my hat? If I can't stay at home, does it make sense for me to stay in Tucson, Arizona, if my 4 kids live in 4 different states? Because who's going to oversee my care? So that aging plan also involves where we do the research, the market research on home care companies, adult daycare programs, and all of the different levels of care. If you have 2 aging parents, what's the plan if they both need 2 different levels of care? So it's really helping them sort out what their options are for their current needs and their long-term care needs. We then teach them, they get all the tools they need to be successful. So we teach them about what are the differences in levels of care, like independent living, assisted living, and all the way through. We teach them how to tour these facilities with confidence, because again, that's why I started my business in the first place, is because families don't know what questions to ask.
Right.
They think that just because a place is pretty, that it's going to provide good care. And I'm like, not at all. Like, you
I
have to
love
look at
a story that you talked about there, where like it was a high-end place with, nice art everywhere, but the people looked miserable. Receptionist was not a warm human being, versus a place that was not the Ritz-Carlton, but people seemed happy. Like the people under care were enjoying themselves.
I have an 8-page checklist that my clients get of all the different questions to ask when you're in these facilities. Because yes, we can do the market research and get the floor plans, the amenities, make sure that the list that we provide are actual viable options. But it boils down to that tour experience, right?
Sure.
So it can be super fancy, super pretty, but are the residents happy, or do they still have oatmeal on their shirt and it's 3:00 in the afternoon and that's from breakfast?
Right.
We also teach them how to be bold advocates, because we know that the quality of care has been less than great in most of these care communities. The World Health Organization did a survey in 2020 and found that 64% of CNAs, or certified nursing assistants, in these long-term care facilities admitted to abusing and neglecting their residents.
Wow.
So we know that, and I know that number is even higher because I have a patient advocacy division of Care Right. And we know that we have to fight tooth and nail with these nurses and these physicians to get just basic quality care.
It sounds like, in most of these cases, people are scrambling, just trying to get things in place. And so they're not even thinking to that next level of advocacy. Let's take a step back for a second. So you're facilitating this conversation. You're getting a plan in place. There's 2 parties here. There's the caregiver client. That's one party or parties that you're working with. And then, of course, the client that's actually needing care. For both parties, what exactly are you trying to accomplish?
trying to get them educated, because again, they're coming to me very uneducated. So they think Medicare is going to pay for everything. I can always tell when they have a loved one with dementia and they didn't do their homework, because they'll say things like, if dad's dementia progresses, instead of when dad's dementia progresses. So the goal is to get improved family communication, help them make informed decisions, help them understand what their care options are based on what they can afford. And number 4, help them age in place at home. And also number 5, make sure that they know what care facility options can be available when they're ready to make that change. And number 6 goal is to make sure that they use that grab and go binder and get their documents in order.
Can you tell us about the book?
I can't. Well, there's no point in holding it up.
You can. We'll comment on it.
I absolutely can tell you about the book. That was a fight to the finish there to get that thing done. So the book is called The Invisible Patient: The Emotional, Financial, and Physical Toll on Family Caregivers. I wrote this book because I am trying to reach the 65.7 million family caregivers that are out there in the United States. Now, I'm just little old me, so it's kind of hard to reach that. I mean, that's a big, lofty goal. So the only way that I could think about trying to reach families and help them help themselves was to write a book. So it's really jam-packed with how to develop your own aging plan. I have a family meeting agenda in there. So it's a bunch of like bullet points of the down and dirty of, if you have aging parents, or you're the mom and dad and you don't want to be a burden on your kids, here's how you develop an aging plan. Here's what you should have in your grab and go binder. Here's how you interview home care companies. Here's some questions on how to tour care facilities. So everything that I do white glove approach, I created a chapter for that with a whole bunch of bullet points. It's a little bit probably intimidating at the beginning when you first open it.
Is it as thick as your other binder?
It's no, it is not as thick as my other binder, but it's like the typeset on it is like 16, right? Because most of the people that might be reading this might have vision impairment. So it's thicker because the print on it's big.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So even if people don't contract you for the services you provide, like it's still sort of a playbook for things to think through and still very education based, which is what I love about your whole approach.
And then I also have, because I know that my book, even though it's on Amazon, it's still not going to get in the hands of the 65.7 million family caregivers. So what I did was I also created a free Facebook group called the Care Right Family Caregiver Solutions Facebook group. And every day we put information in there about self-care or dementia or, considerations. Now that's the free group. Now, if they want to learn how to develop their own aging plan, then they can upgrade to the class on where I teach them as a group how to develop your own aging plan with your own family.
Tiered approach. I love it.
Yes. Yes.
So I was a little skeptical about this whole topic before I started educating myself, particularly when it comes to long-term care. So I thought you just sold long-term care. I thought that was the angle here, and it's like the opposite of that. I know. That was soothing for me to learn very early on. But you have experience with long-term care and working with financial professionals. I want to kind of get to our audience, which is financial professionals, and kind of what they do well and what they don't do so well. But as a product, long-term care being a product, like what are some of the things that it does do? But maybe more importantly, what are some of the things that it does not do that people think it does?
It seems that some people who sell the product don't actually know how it works. So that's my experience is they can sell it, but then 20 years from now, when their client needs to use it, they're really not sure how that whole process works. I have 2 categories now of clients, right? Because I have the people that are in their 80s, 90s, and 100s that have those old Cadillac programs or the Cadillac policies where it paid really, really well. But then I also have younger clients that are in their 60s, 70s, who have those life insurance hybrids. Since your audience is financial advisors and planners in the financial industry, is making sure that you don't just have a one and done conversation about long-term care insurance, making sure that that's part of your protocol when you're meeting with your clients, of just making sure that they understand what that policy covers. Every single client that I've ever worked with has never understood what their policy is, how to activate it. They don't know what ADLs mean, activities of daily living, and they have zero idea of what an elimination period is. They don't have any idea what that means. And so one tip or suggestion I would give to your audience is making sure that if this is a product that your client has, that you have regular conversations about it, that it's not a one and done conversation. Number two, about long-term care insurance, is making sure that you are having this conversation about how would you pay for care? Because again, families just seem to, for whatever reason, assume that Medicare is going to pay for everything, or someone else will pay. And it's like, no, this is going to be out of pocket unless you have long-term care insurance, or you're a veteran, or you use a reverse mortgage. So making sure that they understand how care gets paid and really how expensive care can be.
Costs have gone up. Nuclear families are not living all in the same city, much less time zone. It's more expensive and it's less convenient, which is why planning and having some sort of plan makes sense. Yep. The other thing I want to avoid is scaring people into action, because I'm sure you have multitudinous stories of like how things have gone bad. But yeah, let's flip that a little bit. Like, when this works, or clients of yours that work with you over a period of time, like, paint the picture of what the ideal scenario looks like.
Ideally, families would come to me or get referred to me proactively, meaning they're not in crisis and they are still getting along. Because 92% of my clients come to me in crisis. Their relationships are so strained that in 85% of those families, I'm doing family mediation alongside of trying to facilitate their family.
You wear some hats.
Actually, that's why I look like this. This is gray hair everywhere. So ideally, if advisors, and that's what I teach advisors in that elder planning specialist program, is start having these conversations with your clients. And so if your clients are the Ethels and the Marvins, they're the 70, 80, and 90-year-olds, say, what kind of conversations have you had with your adult kids about the what ifs and what whens of aging? They know that they also want to age in place at home, but as an advisor, you need to help them understand that that's a great goal, but we still have to have plan B
contingency
in place,
plans, yeah.
A contingency plan. And we know that the good care communities have long waiting lists. So to the daughters and the sons, what conversations have you had with your parents about aging? Is there anything in your personal life that's impacting your ability to earn a living, that's impacting your health, or impacting your relationships? Is there anything in your personal life that's affecting your career or your livelihood? They will absolutely say, yes, actually there is. I'm taking care of mom and dad, and I'm not taking that job promotion because I don't need any more responsibility. Yeah. According to a Genworth study, we know that 46% of family caregivers had to work fewer hours. So as an advisor, you have a vested interest in making sure that you are identifying and meeting the needs of your clients all the way around. We know that 63% of family caregivers are paying for their loved one's care out of their own pocket. So as an advisor, it is prudent to know that this is what's happening with families. And I know that you are all working with families in this boat. Mm-hmm. And it makes the relationship stickier when you say, Sally, I have your financial plan in place, but we use a collaborative approach here at firm, whatever, and we have a resource that we'd like to connect you to. Whether it's a realtor, you need to be building as advisors and using that collaborative approach you need to be building a trusted network of professionals to refer your clients to, because you can't be the one-stop shop, but you can be like me and be the hub and then make the referrals to the professionals that family needs.
So is that how you work with financial professionals? You help them develop that network, understand what questions to ask, and then also, how did you start working with financial professionals? I'm just curious.
So we'll answer that one first.
Yeah.
So the reason I started Plan for Life Now, my other company, so I got CareRight. I wear two hats. So I have CareRight, which is direct to consumer, facilitating family meetings, family mediation, and aging plans. But when I first started CareRight, I was like, okay, so who is already working with consumers who have the intellect of planning ahead? So I was like, oh, that would be financial planners. Mm-hmm. So within a couple of years of starting CareRight, I started sponsoring Wisconsin FPA. And very, 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 very quickly, through a ton of one-to-one meetings, when I would ask them, well, how are you addressing the needs of your aging clients? And so then they're like, well, how much more we can upsell them on long-term care insurance or other products that we have. And I was like, oh, I see. But what about like meeting the needs of your clients without having to sell a product, but like using a collaborative team approach with other professionals? And so that's how I started Plan for Life Now and created that elder planning specialist designation with the National CFP board, so that CFPs can get 10 CEs and call themselves an elder planning specialist. So how I work, to answer your second question, that's how I work with advisors, is in a two-part capacity. Number one, through having them go through the training, the elder planning specialist course. And number two, working directly with their clients. And I like it when the advisor joins on that 30-minute consult with their client and participates in that whole aging plan process, because then they, learn a lot about their client that they didn't know, because I'm asking questions that they don't, because I'm not a financial planner, right? And number two, it helps make that relationship sticky, because now because they participate in my aging plan process with me facilitating family meetings, now they're actually meeting that second generation.
We talk about connecting generations almost endlessly, because the average age and demographic of our financial professionals is somewhere between 55 and 60. And so if they are not in need of this type of service, it's likely that a good chunk of their clients are. But even me, as a 40-year-old with aging parents, I see a need for some conversations around this.
And it's better to have these conversations now. And as an advisor, do you know how good that makes you look when you're not just focused on portfolio and assets under management? When you're like, you know what, I care about you as a person, right? Not just about the portfolio, but I care about you as a person. The advisors that go through that elder planning specialist program, those advisors have that mindset of, you know what, we see that the needs of our clients are changing. We want to stay on top of that and help support them through that journey, because they also know that that's going to help them be more successful as an advisor as well.
So you mentioned the advisors you're working with tend to be that way, the holistic, the caring. Is there an opportunity for differentiation here? In other words, if I go out and I get this designation, or I work with you, or I have the resources, would make them stand out. How do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. So when you have aging parents, or if you're aging, wouldn't it make sense to work with advisors who are properly trained in what your needs are going to be? I mean, it just makes sense. So that's how you can differentiate yourself as an advisor. That's how you differentiate yourself, because you are specially trained in elder care issues and family caregiver issues. Most advisors are not trained in that, and that's why their clients aren't having these types of conversations.
So let's do a couple more things before we let you go. And we really, really appreciate you coming on. I want to do a case study with some fictitious random people that are absolutely not real, named Jeff and Karen Seid. They're going to be fictitious. And then we're going to do some summary talking points, summarize the whole thing for financial professionals. So let's do Jeff Seid first. Jeff is
I'm so excited for this.
I'm not going to go crazy. All I'm going to do is share their perspective. And because they don't listen to me when I talk about anything to do with this, like, again, about family members not being able to have conversations. So I just want what you would say to them. Okay. So Jeff's side is going to be 70 soon. Really healthy guy. Never drank, never smoked, ate pretty well, watched his weight, so that's part one. Does not believe in doctors at all. Zero. He's into the alternative medicine. That's his jam.
Okay.
And when we talk about, him living a long time or whatever, his comment to me is, I'm not going to eat anything. I'll die in the street. I don't care. Okay. So that's one. Karen, her perspective is, I don't want to save any money. I don't want to think about that. I want to be able to spend my money while I'm young and able to use it, because when I'm old and decrepit, and if something happens to me, I'll just go and move into one of my son's houses or something like that. The point is, this discussion for them, they don't even want to have it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to care about it. What would you say to those two people?
Okay, so I only get this literally every single day. So here's what I say to that. So it's hardly ever mom and dad who call me for an aging plan. Who do you think it is?
It's
us.
Children. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the kids, right? Because we know that 58% of adult kids will get thrust into that role of family caregiving. So this is how you get around that, or this is how you broach your parents with this type of conversation. It's sneaky as heck, but it works.
I already love it then.
It's a little bit sneaky, but it works because you ask them questions that nobody in their right mind would say no to. All right. So mom and dad, is it important to you to have a say in what happens to you as you age? Who's going to say no to that?
Right.
Is it important to you to have a say in what happens to you as you age, or what kind of care you get? Is it important for you to have the best quality of life possible? Who's going to say no to that? So when we talk about the Karens, right, like, well, I'm going to just spend my money and whatever happens to me, I'll just go on Medicaid, because that's some people's plan. And that's a terrible, terrible plan, because you have no say in what happens to you. You have no say in where you get your care. You have no say in where you live to get your care. You have no say in your care providers, because you have to go to a doctor that actually works with Medicaid people. And you have to know that, and this is going to sound terrible, but in care facilities that are Medicaid facilities, you should never expect to get the best quality. Even if you wanted to stay at home, Medicaid does not pay 100% for you to be able to stay at home. So we know that from conversations with home care companies that they send their A team out to people who are private pay, and they send their B team, their less than great home care workers, to their Medicaid people, because they're going to get paid no matter what, right? So when you have parents that are resistant, say, is it important to you to have a say in what happens to you? Is it important for you to not be a burden on your kids? Speak from the heart. And then I always give them more, because parents can be sneaky little suckers, right? And so then you go the route of leveraging what you do know about your parents. Do they have long-term care insurance? Yes, great. Then that tells me that they at some point had the intellect to plan ahead from a long-term care insurance perspective. Do they work with a financial advisor? Yes. Okay, that tells me they have the intellect to plan ahead. Do they have their estate documents done? Yes. That tells me they have, see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
So the aging plan is no different. Just like you pay a financial planner, just like you pay an attorney, just like you pay a tax specialist, people pay us to do an aging plan for them. So it's a multi-pronged approach. When I ask moms and dads, what are your goals as you age? It's always the same two responses. I want to age in place at home, and then right out of their breath and their cute little lips is, but I don't want to be a burden on my kids. But again, guess who is calling me?
Right.
So when I ask the kids, what are your goals for your parents? It is a version of the same thing, a variation of the same thing. I want my parents to be happy. I want them to be safe. I want them to have the best quality of life possible, and I want them to have the best quality of care possible. The only way to marry or unite those sets of goals is through having an aging plan.
Oh, this is all that makes it makes so much sense, right? Like the financial plan, right? The estate plan. It's like I've never known this was a thing. And like I said, watching my mom go through this a number of years ago and not wanting to go through that myself, we're going to be talking offline.
And you know what makes me sad, and that's the social worker coming out in me, is that you would hope the aging process brings families together. And I'm here to tell you that it does not because of family dynamics, because of money.
Aging can be a disaster for families, but it doesn't have to be.
Aging can be a positive experience if you have an aging plan in place and you have your ducks in a row, like you have your grab and go binder or your version of a grab and go binder, right? It can be a positive experience if we have a plan.
I love it. Well, so we talked about a ton of resources for people, but let's go through them really quickly. So there's the book, the I don't know if we mentioned the name, The Invisible Patient. You have a podcast, which is fantastic. You have financial professionals on. You have various interviewees on. What's the name of the podcast?
So it's called The Caregiver Crisis.
Awesome. And then you have a website for CareRight, your concierge of senior care planning, which again, a few weeks ago did not even know that it was a thing. So glad to learn that it is a thing. Where can people reach out to you in regards to those services?
So they can reach out to me on the website. I have a calendar on the website, and that's carerightinc.com. They can also, I also have a CareRight Facebook page that people can message me on that as well. Or they can just call my cell, the good old-fashioned way, 239-770-6322.
Got that good Florida zip code. I love it.
Yep.
Annalee, thank you so much for bestowing some wisdom upon us. This is a crucial topic. I will be sharing this conversation with a lot of people. So I appreciate the time, the knowledge, and we look forward to seeing you down the road.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Annalee.
You bet.
Thank you for tuning into the CareRight podcast. We hope today's discussion has provided you with valuable insights. If so, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with others who might find it helpful. Remember, CareRight is more than just a podcast. It's a community dedicated to supporting family caregivers with comprehensive care planning, crisis management, and resources for every stage of aging. Stay connected with us for future episodes as we continue to explore essential topics in aging planning, elder care, and financial planning. Until next time, take care, plan wisely, and remember, you're not alone in your caregiving journey.